Hi there, welcome to Nomadic Diaries. We're the podcast that takes you on journeys through the lives of those who have already embraced the international lifestyles. Whether you're an expat, a digital nomad, or someone who's dreaming of those lifestyles, this is your passport to a world of insight. We dive deep into the hearts and minds of the overseas lifestyle professionals, the authors, and researchers. Join us in this fun adventure as we deconstruct all the elements of expat and nomadic lifestyles, one captivating story at a time. Hello and welcome to Nomadic Diaries. It is my privilege today to introduce you, our listeners, to Kate Gondouin. Kate is our guest today and she resides just outside of Toulouse, which is in the south of France. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, Doreen. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, well, we're thrilled to have you on today and thrilled to have you participate in opening a bit of your diary and sharing some of the wisdom and brilliance that you have. Now, just to give you listeners a little bit of context, Kate spent 25 years plus in corporate change management, international HR, project management. And so she has a great foundation as far as leadership and helping others manage change. So, Kate, tell us a little bit about some of the changes you have had to manage, because I know you are from one country, living in a second country, married to a couple of other countries. So would you like to explain?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just before we start, I'm only married to one person, okay? So we're not into this kind of like multiple marriages. But yeah, of course, I'd love to share a little bit. So my background is I'm from the UK. I've grown up there. I lived in Yorkshire all of my childhood. And so when I started working, I always dreamt of traveling, but I don't think I anticipated exactly quite how much traveling I was going to be doing. So yeah, I started off within the financial services. So I was working for Barclays Bank and I was traveling into different cities in Leeds, Birmingham, London. And after working for Barclays, I went off on my global world travel and got a real taste for traveling. So I took a year to travel around the world. And during that time, I was literally moving every 3 days at the most. So I was packing and unpacking and repacking and moving by train, by bus, by car, by plane, all over the world. And I came back and I moved to Bristol and my career changed. I went in a different direction and I ended up working for Airbus. So any of you who know, Airbus is an international European company that design and manufacture aircraft, but it's basically made up of people who are based preliminarily in Germany, Spain, France, and the UK. So it's a very international context. And whereas if you're working in London, you may go by tube, when you work in Airbus, it was often that you're going by plane to different meetings. So I had the opportunity to work with people from all over the world, which was fantastic. And during that time, I also met my now husband, and we decided to move to France so that I could improve my French. He is French. So the idea of moving here was so that I would be able to communicate more easily with my in-laws and my new family. And I wanted an adventure. So we decided to move, which we did, but we did it when I was pregnant with my first child. So we moved to the south of France, to Toulouse, where Airbus has got its headquarters. And that's where we've been for nearly 13 years. And now, as you say, I'm married to a couple of different nationalities because my husband now works away. So my husband is traveling to Italy or Belgium pretty much every week whilst I'm staying here in France. So it's a bit of an international experience.
Absolutely. Talk about being global. Now, you know, when we think about Europe, if we're considering it from the US perspective, it's like, well, France is just next door to Belgium. And, you know, going to Italy every week, that's not so bad. However, could you tell us a little bit about the actual day-to-day grind, the things that are really challenging in juggling countries that are so close to each other, that speak different languages and have different cultures and aspects? Could you tell us some of the nitty-gritty stuff?
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of the things is, as you say, geographically, they are physically very close compared to the States. You know, you're talking much smaller distances, but you do have very strong different languages and different cultures. And I personally experienced a huge shift from England to France, which is only across a small piece of water. Okay, it's the
Yes.
tiniest piece of water, and yet the cultural differences are huge. There is just basic things like, communicating, being able to telephone. That's one of the hardest things when you move to a new country. It's to understand how to express yourself when you're not able to rely on kind of like gesturing or pointing or smiling helplessly, going, I don't really know what the word is, but whatever. Numbers is a big thing in a foreign language because people tend to speak very quickly in their own language. So from a
Yes.
day-to-day perspective, if you're needing to phone up and organize something or to do something, it can add extra stress and, pressure to do things. But from a practical perspective, you have to have your ID card or your passport with you. You've got to get on a plane or a train. You've got to go through the kind of like the customs. It's not as bad now because obviously there's the euro, which is the same currency, but previously it was
Yes.
different currencies. So you'd have to have
Yes.
different purses to be able to travel.
Yes. I
Just
remember.
practical things in terms of roaming on, data
Yeah.
roaming on your phone, just the
Yes.
nitty gritty of stuff like that. And allowing the big thing for us is Belgium is too far to be able to drive.
Okay.
You have to fly. So you have
Yes.
to allow the time for the, check-in at the airport, and then you're sitting around, you're waiting a lot of time, you're with a lot of people. So in terms of, you're exposed to a lot more things in terms of just, cold and flus and stuff like that. The
Yes.
tiredness that you get of traveling can be
Weariness.
quite an impact.
Yeah.
It can
Yes.
have a real impact. So that means they're basic nitty-gritty stuff.
So you are located in Toulouse most of the time, and your
Correct.
husband does most of the traveling. So you are the anchor, you're the glue, you're holding down the fort, correct?
Yes and no, because I've got my own business. And so I'm doing facilitation for different organizations, global companies. So in the next few months, I'm traveling to Geneva, I'm traveling back to the UK, and potentially I'm going to Amsterdam as well, which is fine. But then you're trying to logistically organize and coordinate different diaries. And we don't have the same support network here as if we were in our own country with, family nearby. So you're reliant on a different network than you would if you were in the same country. So, for example, my sister, when they had small children, my mum and dad, who were in the same country, if they had business things or, they needed to get away for whatever, the parents could come down. It's not the same when you're in a different country. And my in-laws are in the same country, but it's a 10-hour journey. So they're not just around the corner. So it is very, logistically with a family being abroad, that's part of the biggest challenge, I think.
To circle back a little bit, one of your intentions, you said your intention was to move to France, to learn French better, to be able to communicate with your in-laws better. How is that working out for you?
Do you know, it's really interesting because I did French at school years ago, many, many years ago.
Yes.
I always said I'm not a linguist. I always struggled with language, but I love to talk. And so I kind of got by, but then I spent 3 months in Spain and I learned Spanish. And I found that the Spanish and the French were actually, for me, they were too close as languages. So they kind of like got mixed up. So I would be talking what I thought was French. And my husband was like, no, actually, that's Spanish. And then when we went to Barcelona, for example, my husband was saying, you do know you're not speaking Spanish at the moment. You're actually talking French. And it's kind of like I just switch between the two. But the more that I've been here and the more that you put yourself into the situation where you have to speak the language and to try, then the easier it gets. I also found that being with people who are understanding of what it's like to speak a foreign language is a very different experience than if you're in a large group of people who are all local and you're the only non-native French speaker. They tend to speak very quickly. They talk over each other. It's a cultural thing as well. But I'm now going to be, so the training that I'm going to be doing is facilitating in French. So my French has definitely improved.
Oh, congratulations. Well
thank
done.
you. Thank you. It's quite funny, actually, because when I came here, I learned the lessons that I'd learned when I was in Spain, which is to use children's books as a way of learning the language. A lot of repetition, keeping things simple, learning by talking and by doing and doing it bit by bit. And now my children correct my French for me, which is both helpful and not so helpful, depending on how kindly I do it.
Oh, that's amazing. Our listeners have heard me lament about the joys of learning Spanish here while living in Mexico, because French was my first language. And I started, several decades ago, and that was what set me on the path. As the listeners have heard many times, it was the language that put me on the path to doing global work and international trainings, because my first place they sent me to was Cameroon, West Africa. So yes, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. And you live that challenge. So talk to me a little bit about some of the day-to-day things that you navigate. So you speak English. You probably speak English and French with the children. And do you have an expat community around you? Because there's quite an expat community in Toulouse. I've had friends who've lived there working for Airbus, actually. So tell me about that. And have you managed to find a good balance between being in the French community and being in the expat community?
It's a really, really good question. And that's actually something that I totally underestimated before I moved over here, because I'd never had the experience of it. There wasn't an international experience when I was growing up in Yorkshire. It just wasn't on my radar at all. But there is quite a considerable expat community here, but it's not the expat that you may get in like the Middle East or in different places. It's a different feeling. I think that's one of the things that, for me, the expat badge can be quite misleading, because it conjures up an idea of what it really is like that doesn't always apply. I think the thing here in Toulouse is, yes, there are a lot of people who come here for Airbus, principally. There are obviously other companies, but Airbus is one of the big ones. So you get a lot of people who are here on different levels of benefits and pay and things like that. But also different expectation of, are they going to be integrated into France? Are they planning on staying here? Or is this a short-term temporary thing? So you have this, it's almost like an interim situation where there are some people who consciously choose to integrate into the society and for friendships. And then there's another group of people who are here just for a couple of years. And so you make friendships that are going to finish very quickly. And so there's this kind of like, it's a bit of in limbo, I guess, is the experience.
They're actually living in transition.
Yeah. And living in transition, with some come over with a very clear idea of, we're only going to be here for so long because that's the contract. Some come over with a view that we're going to stay for 5 years, and it bleeds into kind of like 10, 15. Some come over going, yes, this is what we're doing, and then when they get here they realize, actually no, this isn't for them. There's a lot of people who did a huge about turn post COVID, because you'd always had the expectation that, especially for the UK or Germany or Spain, where the other bases are, the family's really close. You can easily get on a flight. You can go, so you can get integrated, you can still have the connection with your native country and your family and friends. But since COVID, that relationship has changed. And I've actually noticed a lot of people, it's almost like COVID kickstarted the reflection as to, is this really what they want to do? Where they want to be, or do they actually want to be closer back to family? It's also to do with the age as well, I think, in terms of, I'm in the generation where the parents are getting older, therefore you don't want to be as far away from them in case anything happens, and stuff like that. So I think it's very much a transitionary place.
I hear that, and I liked what you said about 5 years bleeds into 10 and then 15. As our listeners know, our 5 years in Saudi turned into 15.
There you go.
And really, that comes down to the individual's clarity about the vision for their life, correct?
Correct, 100%. And also, I think it's the clarity about the vision for life, but also about the openness and the willingness to explore the opportunities that arise. Because a lot of the time, you don't actually know until you're in it and you're going down a particular path as to whether or not that's the path that you want, or do you want to do something different. And one of the big things for me, and this is one of the big differences I think within the expat community here, is that there are some people who both partners are working. Both both adults are working and have what I would say are professional careers. So things that are they require some more thinking about it. And people who are in that situation need to be much clearer beforehand as to what's going to happen and how it's going to evolve. If you've got the family situation whereby one person has a job and the other person is not working or is taking a career break, then the clarity and the vision and the opportunities are slightly different. If you're trying to navigate dual careers effectively, then it obviously adds a little bit more complexity to the situation.
Yes, I have a friend who recently wrote a book in the last 2 years about juggling 2 professional careers in the international lane. And there is many deep conversations to be had.
I don't know who your friend is, but I read a book which had the most profound effect on me, which is exactly about that, which, I recommend this book to everybody that I speak to.
What is it called?
Whose career, yours, mine, or ours?
It's the same book. That's Yvonne's book.
That's correct, yes. Absolutely fantastic book. I can strongly recommend it.
Yes, I very much look forward to interviewing her one day on Nomadic Diaries. That is an excellent super resource and very well researched and very well resourced. Yeah. And so tell me, being a solo parent overseas 5 days a week, maybe more sometimes, how do you maintain your sense of well-being and balance all these responsibilities that you have? Do you calendar it like family time every week? Do you have a schedule? Is it written? How rigorous are you about that?
Okay, so I will be completely honest and transparent with you and your listeners. It's a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes it works better than others, okay? Because if it was all scheduled, that would be fantastic. But I haven't found anybody who manages to schedule everything in life. There's always things that are happening that need to be adapted and adjusted. I think when you're in a routine, so when the children are at school, for example, it's easier because there is more of a forced schedule. I think the biggest challenge comes when you have situation outside of the norm. So like we were saying earlier, this is the end of a 2-week school holiday. So I'm still kind of like trying to juggle the working from home, entertaining the children, the doing the normal stuff, and to kind of like maintain relationships and friendships and this, that, and the other. And that's when it gets harder because you have to be really conscious about what you're doing. And that's the thing that I find the hardest and the one that takes the most energy and attention. It's the easiest thing to slip out of. I find it much easier when the children are in school because it gives me that kind of like breathing space to be able to plan, because you know when they're going to start, you know when they're going to finish, you can fit things in between. When it's during the holidays, it's a little bit more up in the air.
It's a free-for-all.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And, as a change management expert, you know this lane because life is not all structured and not all spontaneous. It's a combination. And isn't it a matter of bridging those 2 experiences between the serendipitous and the delight and the surprise and the well-chosen, well-thought-through moments of creating a vision and moving towards that? And so what's your best practice, or what is your most favorite go-to tool that you use frequently to navigate just that really thin line? Okay,
so I'll give you a little insight. My go-to is really about having the bookends. So bookends of the day. Okay. So I've worked with a number of different coaches and mentors and the whole thing around a morning routine and an evening routine. And there are different processes, different approaches. Yes. I'm not saying that one is better than another, but I would say that for me personally, I need to have the bookends of what do I do to set myself up in the morning and what do I do to kind of like finish off the day. They're the ones that I use to then kind of like shape the day, but it's that bookend at the beginning and at the end of the day. Personally, I follow an approach whereby in the morning, I'm very much checking in with, okay, who do I want to be? What do I want to enjoy? And what's the one thing that I have to do? That is the thing that then lets me set the intention for the day. And that's almost like the guiding North Star for that particular day. I don't do it over longer than a day because honestly, things change so quickly. It's just not going to work. And then at the back end of the day, it's around what am I grateful for? what's worked, what still needs to be done for tomorrow. And then I have this process that one of my mentors helped me to understand, which is about having an intention for sleeping. Now, sleeping is it's my Achilles heel. If I don't get my sleep, I really struggle. And I'm at the stage where my sleep has been affected again. So I'm relearning the importance of making sure that I'm very well rested, which doesn't necessarily mean kind of like unbroken sleep, but it is around, okay, what is it that I want to get from the sleep? Is it that I want to feel energized? Is it that I want to feel rested? Is it that I want to have an answer to a problem that I've got? Is it what is it that I do? And I have the same with the kids in terms of we have a morning routine and an evening routine. It works for both of them to get them in the right frame of mind to go to school. And then at the end of the day to kind of like check in and see what's worked, what have they learned. So I use the GLAD process for the evening for the kids. I don't know if you know it or your listeners know it, but very simple that I can recommend is GLAD. So what are you grateful for? What have you learnt? What action have you taken? And what are your dreams and desires? And I literally do that with the kids in the evening, just before they go to bed, as a way of checking through, okay, what's the day gone? And the desire, the dream is, what do they want to dream about? So what is it they're wanting? And what's their desire for tomorrow? So they put themselves in the right state to then have a night, which is then processing things and putting them off into a good set the next day.
That's a wonderful framework. It's a very popular framework, but I think it's so popular because it's so simple. All of us can remember this, to be grateful, to reflect on what we've learned. What action would we taken, or what action would we love to take, and what are our dreams and desires? So thank you for sharing that. That's very, very practical information that listeners can take with them and, practice this at home and play with it. Yes, exactly, because it changes all the time, doesn't it? It looks a little different. Even if you're using the same process, as we change, it shines light on who you're becoming rather than who you were.
Exactly.
Tell me, you're juggling this international lifestyle. You are also examining and growing and expanding your own career simultaneously while raising a family. How do you prioritize your personal self-care or your mental health while doing this? Recently, mental health, at least in the Western hemisphere over here in the States and North and South, is really becoming a greater topic and concern. And so I wonder, do you have some things, I'm imagining that this process alone takes care of a lot of mental health, right?
It does. I learned through bitter experience that when you don't look after your mental health, that it will come back and bite you. Okay, yes. So I learnt in a way that I wouldn't want anybody else to experience. And through effectively having a burnout, I then went on a mission to find out, what do I need to do to get better, but also then to prevent things in the future. So I have, again, for me, there are kind of like generic things. It's all around, who do you listen to? What do you put inside your head? So if you are like most people, you've got headphones on or in your ears most of the time, is that stuff helping you? Is it making you feel good, or does it make you feel bad? If it's making you feel bad, then my recommendation is stop and do something else. A lot of it is around the basics. So my kids hate the fact that I keep saying there's 3 magic medicines in the world, in my view. One is sleep, one is water, and one is fresh air. Yes. And if you have those, then you are setting yourself up for success in everything that you do. So my thing is very much around, I've taught myself, and it's a constant thing, is to learn how to really breathe effectively, because I got into kind of like hypertension breathing, which is really not very good for you. So I do a lot around the breathing. I also do a lot of focusing on my sleep, which is all tied to breathing as well, in terms of how do you get good sleep, get the sunlight on your face early in the morning, all the usual things, and getting outside. And my thing is about being outside in nature, going for a walk, really focusing on what's around me, connecting with something that's not me, that's not to do with all the bad things that are going on in the world. It's around being aware of how you're feeling in your body and in your head, and being conscious and intentional about what you do.
And that is such great wisdom, because one of the reasons we chose to rewire, not retire, but rewire to Mexico is the indoor-outdoor living that we get to experience here most of the year. And we bought a smaller house, less work, and it is just festooned with bougainvillea and hibiscus, and it's really, really colorful. And I think putting ourselves in nature and allowing nature to reflect back some color really helps as well. And very wise.
One of the things that I really value, I mean, here, I always assumed the south of France would be sunshine from, morning to night and all through the seasons, and it isn't. It's a lot of wind and rain and all the rest of it. But one of the things that I really underestimated is how many different colours of green there are. And so when you go for a walk, it's actually being conscious about looking at what's around you and really taking it in. And there's a whole load of stuff around different energies and colour therapy and everything. But it's the colour green is actually very calming. So whether you are outside or in a room that is filled with green, it has a calming effect on you. But actually just consciously noticing the different greens, it means that you're actually focusing on something else, and it really kind of like neutralizes any stress or tension that's going on around. That's what I find really helps me. Just, listening to the birds, seeing what's around, using your senses.
And being really fully present to being living life, because every day is an irreplaceable day.